Welcome back to the Joseph Graham Show. Today I'm super excited. I have Michelle Ann Collins on my show. Now, I met her through our good friend Amanda Brown. I think Amanda just knows a lot of really cool people. And I know we talked a little bit before, probably about a month ago, kind of just to see if it'll be a good fit for you. But in your own words, tell us who you are, who you help, and what you do.
Okay. And you said this podcast is 3 hours, right? So I have plenty of time to answer all of that.
Yeah,
Just
three,
kidding.
5 hours. We're good to go.
So I'm Michelle Ann Collins. My current passions are to help people with grief education, and grief coaching. So I work a lot in that field. I'm also very busy in the field of suicide prevention and addiction support. And those are contracts I have here in Oregon where I live. I also have my own business where I do speaking, mindfulness, meditation trainings. So I can help people suffer less through learning mindfulness tools. I have 5 books out and I'm working on my sixth right now. And what did I forget? I think that's probably a good summary of what I'm
Well, that
doing
was a
right
lot.
now.
Right.
That's
Right.
not history, that's current.
No, I love that. So, how did you get into, because it's such a niche group, how did you get into grief counseling and suicide prevention? Because that's not something that normally someone says, "Hey, I just want to get into this," because that's some very deep topics.
No, I agree. And every one of my colleagues, without exception, as far as I am aware, has had a suicide loss in their life. And that is what drove them to become more educated and then if they get well enough to help others. I lost my husband to suicide in 2016. My husband, Glenn, Lieutenant Glenn Collins. And after I lost him to suicide, I went through a very, very difficult period where everything in my life kind of went black.
Mhm.
And I made some really poor choices about my health to avoid the pain. And so many of us do, go into the quick fix, the drinking, the substances, just erratic behavior, all of the things that really don't help, even though they seem to help for a very short time. And I ended up with PTSD, and my life was just in a shambles. I couldn't function. There were just basic daily function. And I found a trauma therapist who could work me through my PTSD. While I was going through that, I really learned about uh, somatic experiencing, which I was already a yogi at this point, not just a yogi, but a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist. But it really helped me learn how to fully embody my experience. And that experience included the pain. But by doing that, I was able to heal. I don't think we're ever fully healed. I think it's a journey that I'm still on and will always be, but I am much more available for my life now. And I also learned along the way that I could help others to learn how to be embodied and learn how to grieve in a healthy way. And so I kind of just got called to it. I definitely, when I was a little girl, this was not on my vision board. I want to
Right.
grow up to be a grief coach and I want to speak about suicide in front of veterans or, I've
Yeah.
done all these things, but it's kind of like doing my soul work. And every
Mhm.
time I help someone or every time I give a talk and somebody learns a tool of mindfulness to help them suffer less, I feel like I'm honoring my husband's memory.
No, I love that. And first, thank you for sharing that story because that's definitely a very intimate story. Um, I think sometimes we fall into or are pulled into our calling. Not that we were thinking that's what we were going to do or be, but life just happens that way. And I believe I have the statistics right, but you were definitely the experts. I believe it's 80% men with suicide are more tendency to do suicide, 70 to 80%, and veterans are a number that are pretty high with that. Is that like the findings you've found?
Yeah, I don't tend to quote statistics too much. Those might be right from the study you read, but suicide is actually a very difficult thing to get accurate statistics on. The one thing I will concur with is that veterans are much, much higher than the national average as far as their rate of suicide.
Mhm.
And not just veterans, but current service members as well.
Right. And I think it's such a taboo subject for some people. And in reality, and this is just where my mind goes with it. And again, I am not an expert on this, but like people pass for a lot of different things. And a lot of times there's like with veterans, PTSD or mental trauma or things that they just can't get past. And they don't see a way out. So how do you help the family that's left? Because I'm sure some of them are surprised by it, some of them might not be surprised by it. But that's like a hard thing, especially people that are religious or have different thought processes and all. And I'm just going to say it right off here. I don't think that if you kill yourself, you go to hell. Whoever taught you that was an idiot. That's my personal belief. You can have what beliefs you want. We can agree to disagree, but I just want that
Yeah,
flat out there. I've known people that have done that. Like it's so, and you would never have known. Like a gentleman that when I lived in Texas, his wife and him got divorced, but like I used to go sit in his garage and drink a beer and we would just have fun and talk. And he was friends with another neighbor of mine. And you like, families have issues, but um, yeah. And then my buddy, like after he had moved and they got divorced, they sold the house, whatever. So he wasn't in the area. My other buddy that had stayed more in touch with him said, yeah, he just did that. And I'm like, I was shocked. And I didn't have as close a relationship as like, say, someone that was married to them or a family member, a father, a son, a mother, however that connection is, a dear friend. How do you help people even begin to do it? Because I definitely can see the drinking, the doing crazy things, other things that
yeah,
maybe aren't good for you because you're trying to get your mind to stop.
yeah, exactly. It's really, I mean, all grief is hard, right? But suicide loss adds a couple layers. One is sudden death, can be its own level of grief. And then with suicide, there's always a lot of guilt. So we start by working on guilt, by educating about suicide, how it happens, how it comes about. And it is never your fault that somebody else ended their life by suicide. Um, so guilt is something I focus on, and I think you can probably see over my shoulder there. I've written a couple books specifically for regarding spouse or partner suicide loss. So I wrote one from my perspective as someone who lost their spouse, and then I also wrote one for people like you who haven't necessarily lost a spouse or partner to suicide, but don't know what to do, don't know how to help me after my loss. Because what I noticed was so many of my really good friends, the relationship changed. And it was mostly because they didn't know what to do and I didn't know what to tell them to do. And nobody wants to see you in pain. So that's another way I help grievers is to help them to understand not everyone can be with you in what I call sitting in the suck.
Yeah.
That's what you need. You need people who can be with you, who can put their own pain aside. And it might not be your friends. It might be a therapist or a coach or a grief group or something like that. And that's a tough one in grief because you want to be able to rely on your closest people. But sometimes your closest people just do not have the skills to support you. And that doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make your friendship over. When I'm moderating grief groups, I volunteer moderate grief groups through a company. Grief.com is actually the name of it, and I can't tell you how many of the people, and I do spouse loss, so it's not all suicide, but
Mhm.
so many people have lost friends and family members because they just don't know how to interact in their pain. So it's all education about that, mindfulness of the fact that your person that might be your usual supporter, drive you to your doctor's appointments or stop by with a gift or help you run an errand might not be able to be there for you in that depth of pain.
Hmm. Well, in my mind goes here. So my sister didn't kill herself or commit suicide or anything like that, but she died of a rare cancer that like about 2.5 years ago. But even in that, and we knew it was coming, how some people reacted and responded was weird. And I don't judge them for that. Everyone goes and sees through their different visions. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, cool. Maybe they had someone in their family that has cancer currently going on or did something. I'm just trying to use something even in that high level. And
Yeah,
then you add in the fact of how society looks at suicide instead of understanding that it was more of a probably a mental illness thing. That's my perspective. Again, I am not an expert, but that's just my thought process. So I love what you say. They're finding the right people. And I think that's hard for a lot of people because you expect, well, my best friend will always be there for me. Well, your best friend might not be the right person. So how
right.
do people find the right person? Because again, I think people just don't know what to say, so they don't want to say anything, but that's not good either because then now you're leaving your friend in a very vulnerable, hurting place, but you don't want to say
Hmm.
anything wrong, but you also don't want to say something really stupid. So how do you walk people through that?
Yeah, that's exactly why I wrote the companion book and there's a lot of say this instead of this, a lot of really, really basic education, because of what I went through with my own people that were trying to help me that often said something that made me feel worse.
Mm-hmm.
When people say that was the most selfish act he could have done, don't call my dead husband selfish. I mean, that's not helpful to me. So,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing that is, if you want to be a supporter and you're having those big feelings and you want to bitch and moan and go, oh my God, that guy's the selfishest person or the stupidest person, or just don't do it in front of the primary griever. Go get
Right.
your own help so that when you are with the person who's grieving, who's the primary griever, you can be there for them. And being there, it doesn't mean you can't fix it. That's part of the
Mm-hmm.
problem is people don't want to feel your pain or be with you when you're in pain. So they try to fix it. You know, oh, he's in a better place.
Yeah.
You don't know that. And when you're missing someone, you don't want to hear they're in a better place than with you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I try to educate people. Less is more.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make assumptions, don't make judgments, don't make any global statements. Just be there for the person. Let the griever lead the process. What can I do for you? Can I, look at the basics. Are they drinking? Are they staying hydrated? Are they eating? Are they sleeping? If you can help with any of that, get them food, get, anything like that. And then the next level out, do they have kids? Do kids
Mm-hmm.
need a ride somewhere? Do kids need, especially if it was a parent that they lost, they need somebody to go to those, their basketball game and stuff. So things like that. And the other thing is, don't don't go back to your regular life after 6 weeks, because I can guarantee you the griever won't. So put it on your calendar to call them once a week or send a message once a week or even drop by with, a coffee or something. It's going to go on for a long time. Make it part of your new relationship because this is this person's new reality and it needs to be honored. Every holiday is harder,
Mm-hmm.
every birthday, every anniversary. Anniversaries for someone who lost a spouse are excruciating. So, yeah, and it's an ongoing thing. This is your new life. This is your new relationship. And that's why so many relationships don't survive the grief, the extreme grief situation, because people want to go back to their old friendship. They want everything to be like it was. And this person, if you lost your spouse or partner or anyone primary in your life to suicide, you're never going to be able to go back to being the person you were.
I've seen that because I was remembering now when my wife and I first got married, her cousin. had committed suicide as well, and it wrecked the family. And then people were saying
Yeah.
God, like some of the people were very religious, saying God took an angel, and I'm like, that's the stupidest thing you can say to them right now. And other people were like, oh, I didn't come because I thought you would be okay. It was like, you have, I know it was very weird. It was like people
Yeah.
are. I think what people need to realize is that people are so self-protective that
Yeah.
they can justify in their head that what they're doing is the right thing. And in reality, they're just protecting themselves.
Well, the
But I,
plain fact of
yeah,
it is really, really hard to
mhm,
witness that pain or be around that pain. So people want to fix it for themselves, always with God. So I don't have to feel bad, right? Like you're saying, it's self-protective. And that's why I always recommend people find a good therapist, good
mhm.
coach, good grief group, people who are professionally choose to sit in the pain with you.
Right, because they understand that they're going to know how to connect correct way or support you where you're at, not knowing. And there's so many emotions in death, just in general. Um,
Yeah.
No, I love that. And you said you also help with prevention of suicide and speak on it all. Are there certain signs, and I know that there's not like a check box, like you're not going to do it, but are there certain things people can look for or concerns? How, well, let me ask you this way, how can people help someone that they feel might be there, but without saying, coming out and just saying, hey, Michelle, I think you're going to commit suicide. Like that's, I'm
Yeah.
99% sure you shouldn't do that. But like
Right.
how
No,
can
that's a
people
that's a great question. Yeah. And we have here in the United States a whole system now. All you have to do is pick up any phone and dial 988, and it's completely confidential, and you can get all the resources you need. If you're concerned about someone, they can also send professionals to the person if if they're really in crisis and they need intervention right now, or they're going to take their life. It's so 988 is all you need to know. We don't all have to be experts in suicide prevention. You don't have to go to school for a million years or whatever. There's people in place who have that expertise. And it's basically, I think the most important thing you can do is just keep an awareness of the person. If they have a really great behavior change, like all of a sudden they're using a lot more of whatever substances they might have been using, or they're sleeping at different hours, or not sleeping at all, or uh, not, missing work. And the other big thing is disengagement.
Mhm.
Most people who die by suicide feel disconnected from all of their love, their resources, their belonging. And so trying to help them feel connected. And again, you don't have to be the expert. I don't have to be the expert. We have experts um, to help us with these in these crisis situations, and especially if it's someone you love. Good luck doing the right thing when you're all freaked out because you're worried they're gonna take their life.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's just such a not well, I mean, it's a hard topic and when people don't know what to do, a lot of times they don't do anything, and that's probably the worst thing they could do at that point. Um,
Yeah,
and
I
telling them
I
to
get
just get
that.
over it would be bad too. Like the whole just get over it, suck it up doesn't help either.
No, that is definitely not helpful. I actually, just a few months after my husband died, I had a friend who was struggling and told me that he had a plan. Like, I'm going to end my life tonight. I'm going to do this, like the whole plan. And this is a really big red flag. When someone says,
Hmm.
"Oh, I just want to die," that may not be a suicidal comment at all. That might just be, "Ugh, I'm sad, I'm mad." When someone has a plan, that's when you need to really call the authorities to do an intervention on that. And I did that. I called. I don't remember if 988 was out yet. I don't think it was out yet. So I called 911 here in Oregon, and they sent some people to my friend's work. It wasn't great for him. He was very upset with me and actually didn't speak to me for months. But after what I had just gone through with my husband, I was going to do everything I could
Hmm.
to prevent another suicide. And that was everything I could,
Right.
right? I did
Mhm.
something. I couldn't, go over and, physically stop this person from doing anything. But it did help me feel like I had done what I could. And, the plain fact of it is we can't always prevent suicide.
Right.
There are hospitals that are set up specifically for people who are suicidal with, all the tools that you might think they might use removed. The safest location you could put someone with experts on the floor, on the hospital floor, and people still die by suicide there. And
Hmm.
this is a story I tell everyone who feels guilt. I should have done more. You always feel that way. It took me years to work through that. And I still have little glimpses of that last conversation I had with him, and but guilt does no good. Guilt doesn't help anything.
Hmm. No, I mean, I think it's we get so caught up in, again, because we're always self-reflective. And a lot of times when someone does that, whatever their mind's telling them, I'm not justifying it. It has nothing really to do with us. It's to do with the demons and the battles that they're facing. And again, I'm not,
Exactly.
I think it's such a, we live in a materialistic world where everything is perfect and happy, and then we compare ourselves to everyone else. And in reality, most of us don't even define what success is for us. Like if you make over 100,000 a year, you're making more money than 90% of the world. If you make over 150, you make more money than 95% of the world. But if you look on Instagram, if you're not making 5 million a year, which most people don't make, you're a loser. And that's not true. Or
Yeah,
maybe you
social
didn't get the
media
girl
is
you
tough.
wanted. Yeah. Yeah. I think too many times people judge themselves on what other people consider success. And that's something that I've just been really passionate about. Like, define what success is for you. You can make 80,000 a year, get to spend all the time with your kids and family and be happy, or you can be a multimillionaire. I have friends in both categories, and it's cool. What do you want to do? But I think this topic's just hard because like everyone gets these little preconceived thoughts, and then people can be judgmental. And in reality, it was a thing that happened because a person got to a point where they couldn't face it anymore. And it wasn't that the spouses was not doing this right or the mom or the what, it was none of that. It was just a mental battle they lost. Like
Hmm.
people die of diseases all the time and they fight and sometimes they give up. Same thing with this. That's at least how I look at it. But I do appreciate like the stuff like I didn't even know about 988 until you just said that. I had no clue. Like I've seen
Oh,
like the
yeah.
hotline numbers, like you'll see them on TV late
Hmm.
at night. There'll be like
Hmm.
hotline numbers, but I never heard of 988. So that's actually a good tip. We'll drop it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so there you go. There's my suicide prevention education. However many people that reaches, maybe we can save a life.
Yeah, no, I love that. Now you've wrote 5 books. You mentioned
Mhm.
2 of them. One was how to talk to a spouse, and then the other one was how to tell us about your books because you have 5, and I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. I mess it up all the time too. So the first three are all books I contributed a single chapter to that involved my story somehow, some way. One focused on becoming sober and healing my grief through sobriety and yoga, and one focused on the immediate aftermath of Glenn's death and just getting through, one foot in front of the other. And one focused on, sort of feminine energy, strength. That one's called Awakening the Divine Feminine. But they're all a chapter I contributed to each of these books. One was called Phoenix Rising, done by a publisher in Australia who's a lovely human. And then You Can't Make This Story Up, done by Amanda Johnson and her group of authors. Yeah. Um, and those three books are all really deep stories, just heartfelt stories about going through hard things, how they got through it, how we got through it, and how we, came out the other side grown, right? You grow through trauma, you grow through pain. And then the other two books are solo books, just me. And those are the surviving spouse or partner suicide loss, and then supporting a survivor of spouse or partner suicide loss. So we've already talked a bit about those. And one of the aspects of those two books that I haven't mentioned is that they're really focused on mindfulness practices to help get through, because I think you need a really big toolbox to get through
Hmm.
tragedy and trauma and grief of any kind. So
Yeah.
actually, I'm working on my next book is going to be more general, because after I wrote the two books about spouse or partner suicide loss, a lot of the readers, oh, and the audiobooks just came out in September.
Huh.
So for those of you who don't like to read, audiobooks available. Um, so this next book I'm working on, and probably all my future books, will be more general, uh, not just my story and not just about spouse or partner suicide loss,
Mm. And
but
that's actually where I
basically to
wanted to
help.
go. Yeah. No,
Go
you
ahead.
were saying that like because you mentioned that you're into yogi and you are into mindfulness and all. It's like, well, why don't we talk about that? Because whether it was grief through suicide or grief from a partner loss or grief from just life not being what you want, how can you help people with that? So I've done some mindfulness practices. I've done breath work. I've done, and I'll probably say it wrong, the one where you actually get the front of your brain to drop and you go into like more of the healing thing where I've heard people scream, roll around in like 2 hours. I thought it was
Mm,
like 30 minutes. It was crazy. I've done that. I've done box breathing. But when you say mindfulness, I know there's a lot more than just breath work. Kind of break that down or give us an idea of how people can start using some of those modalities.
sure, yeah. Well, the box breath is a great entry level thing, even just counting your breath. So the idea behind mindfulness is to be present for your current life. Have your mind where your body is. We spend so much time disembodied. We spend
Hmm.
so much time, in our phone. If you're in your phone, you're not where you are, right? And I'm not saying you have to be there 24/7, especially not in our world. But when you use a mindfulness tool that helps you to feel embodied, it supports your nervous system, it supports your immune system. Everything works better. Digestion, so it's actually a health practice, and it's as simple, like you were mentioning the box breath. It's as simple as being aware of your breath, being aware of your body. Those are two mindfulness practices. A little more advanced, awareness of emotions and awareness of thoughts. So those are the four basic practices of mindfulness: breath, thoughts, emotions, body. And there's practices to teach how to do all of those things. I just want to talk a little bit about awareness of emotions, because that one I think has a lot of bang for the buck.
Hmm.
When I'm talking about these things, I have a little graphic that I put up that has a little arrow. I am angry, and then the arrow goes to I am experiencing anger. I am sad. Arrow goes to I am experiencing sadness. So, what you're doing is you're being mindful, you're bringing awareness to your experience
Hmm.
and realizing it is an experience, just like when you were eating breakfast this morning. It might be more painful than when you were eating breakfast, but it is just an experience. It will come, it will go. Emotions come and go, just like waves. So, when you step back from your emotion and see it as an experience, it's so much less impactful. And then you can mindfully
Hmm.
pick something to do to help support your situation. What are you angry about? I'm experiencing anger because, okay, then you can think about it instead of being in it.
Hmm.
I'm experiencing anger because some jerk just cut me off on the freeway. Well, then instead of just I'm angry, and then you go home and you get with your loved ones that you live with and you're like I'm angry, what does that do for them? It makes them angry, right?
Yep.
So instead of pulling everyone into your cesspool of unmanaged emotions, you know how, because you've been practicing and learning mindfulness, you know how to take a breath, you know how to choose your response. And most of us, most people are really good people. They would rather choose compassion, gratitude, forgiveness. How can you use that in that scenario? I'm grateful that that jerk didn't hit me or anyone else on the freeway. You can still feel like they're a jerk, but there's gratitude, and gratitude will bring the anger down.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness. Oh, yeah, I'm sure he didn't mean to do that. You know, compassion. I wonder what kind of crappy day that poor person is having in order to behave that way. Because hurt people, right? If you're happy and fulfilled, you're not going to go around flipping people off on the freeway. So, or cutting people off or whatever. So that's how mindfulness can really help with your day to day life to bring more joy and have less pain.
Yeah, no, I love that. And when you said the flipping off people every day, I'm thinking like I have a really good friend named Brian Bogart. And when we're
Mm-hmm.
just having fun, we'll flip each other off, but you can tell the intent behind it. Like we're just messing around because we're good friends. But you said that, I'm like thinking, going, wait a minute, no, you're right. Because again, and again, I think I've heard this, and again, I'm not an expert in it, but gratitude changes your frequency where it's like there's different levels that you have. When you're in anger, when you're in pain, when you're in sadness, you're at a lower frequency, lower vibration. Whereas when you're in
Mm-hmm.
gratitude or love or compassion or mercy or whatever word you want to put in it, it changes your frequency. And people are like, what do you mean? Well, it changes the atmosphere around you. If you want to go biblical, it makes you feel better instead of makes you feel like crap. It's the same thing. The principles are the principles. We just put different words on them. No, I love that. How do I do have this question because I think about it this way, and I'm a little bit into the human design thing, but like there's different people have more emotion because you said the waves. Different people have more emotional waves, and some people can do it faster. Can you help people process faster, or is it just how you're built? Like well, I'm an Aries. I know this. I get really mad real quick, but I say it, I get it out, and I'm done. And then I just don't, it doesn't affect me. But then, like, my wife is a Virgo and she doesn't love it. She has a harder time letting things go. And I think that's not just because male, female. I think it's just personalities and types. But is there a way to
Mm-hmm.
help different people with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. Um, Anybody can become emotionally intelligent. Anybody can move that arrow that I mentioned earlier from I'm angry to I am feeling anger, and this is what I'm going to choose to do about it. It takes practice. I do a daily meditation. How does that help? Well, it allows me to move my focus to a place of choice. You know how sometimes, like back to the freeway example, you might be ruminating about 20 minutes later. I mean, this guy's forgotten you. You've gone through 10 more iterations of traffic situations, and you're still, 10, 20 minutes back on the freeway being mad at that guy. When you practice mindfulness, you can move your thoughts to something that benefits you, something that allows you to express your actual values. You don't value being mad at some jerk you've never seen before and will never see again. How does that improve your life or the lives of your loved ones or the people you serve through your work or in your community? It doesn't. So when you practice mindfulness, you figure out a way when you're activated by an external source, you figure out a way to self-soothe, and that's different for everyone. Some practices work better than others. You mentioned gratitude. That's I call gratitude the emotional parachute.
Mhm.
I think it's such a saving device. but but with working with people, in coaching, I will figure out some of it comes from what people connect to. Some people like, I'm not grateful for anything, screw that. So then we find something else. We find another tool, forgiveness, compassion. And number one, if people can learn self compassion, that I believe is the most life changing mindfulness practice you can do. Because, and Kristen Neff studies this actually academically. She's been studying for, I think, 15 years. She has a couple of books out. Um, Kristen Neff has proven scientifically that when you practice self compassion, you are a more compassionate person and you have more resilience to help the people in your life, more presence for the people in your life. So it works.
Mhm. I think that's the hard part, at least coming from a man point of view. I'm not saying women don't deal with it. I'm sure they do, but I'm not going to pretend I understand how women think. That's never going to come out of my mouth.
That's
Um,
probably best.
yeah, I know that's best. I've been married 24 years. I understand my wife pretty good, but I'm not going to say I understand everything. But I think like from a man's point of view, because we're always programmed, or most men, I shouldn't put everyone in there, that we're valued for what we do, not who we are. And I think that's been one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is just to love me for my quirks, my faults, my good and my bad. And then forgiving myself is hard because I'm always trying to be the best. And I come from a very alpha sales business world. Like anyone that follows this podcast knows that I deal with high level, C-level CEOs all the time. I deal with the good old boys because that you are only as good as your last sale. And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, no, I can just have a day off and love myself and it's okay. And that took
Yeah.
a very long time. There's still many days where I'm like, oh, I messed that up and I beat myself up and I get in my head. I've learned for me, I got to lift weights. That helps. If I go for walks in nature, that helps. What I eat helps. And then sometimes I forget, like this week was crazy. I had 2 days where I didn't work out, didn't do anything, and I was just getting mad and angry. I'm like, what the heck? And then I finally said, oh, I gotta get back to the gym. Get back to the gym. I get home and everything that was bugging me went away. And it wasn't like I went and pounded weights like crazy. Like I don't live super heavy. I just live to what works for me. But I think finding that helps because you said different
Mm-hmm.
modalities. Because I'm not always gonna be like, I'm grateful for this. I tried that, but sometimes I feel stupid. I'm grateful for the fish. I'm grateful. I if I say I'm grateful, but I could look and go, that mountain's epic. Wow, that's amazing. And if I change the words a little bit, that seemed to help me too. Because I think sometimes we say something that doesn't come out natural. What are your thoughts on that? Like,
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why you need to have a big toolbox. Like I mentioned earlier, it has to be something that works for you, that feels authentic for you. You know, one of my most difficult things, well, difficult, let's say challenging things when I'm working with coaching clients in mindfulness is to teach them to love and accept themselves.
mhm,
And if you think about it, it doesn't change your world, except it changes everything in your world, right?
mhm,
You could still be going to the same job, talking to the same people, sleeping in the same bed, eating the same food. But if you're kind to yourself rather than mean to yourself, your life is just so much better. Everything is so much better. The people around you feel better. So
well,
but
I
that
have a
doesn't
question.
work for some
Yeah.
people. Go ahead.
It's screaming in my head. How do you help people change the programming in their head? Maybe they came from like your Protestant, Judeo-Christian background where if you did something wrong, you're horrible, or maybe they came from an abusive home, or maybe they came from something else. I'm just thinking of who might be listening to this show. How do you help them I say reprogramming or change their perspective because for the longest time, I felt, well, I'm a sinner. I'm horrible. I'm bad. I'm
Yeah.
evil because I was born that way. But I'm sitting going, I've made mistakes and choices, but my intention has always been to try to be helpful, to be good. So is this really the paradigm that I'm going to believe in? And it's taken me years to get, and I still fall into it. But how can people break that? Because I think it always goes down to that root.
Yeah, yeah, we are conditioned by society or our upbringing to be shameful, to be less than and to think that people are better than us. And it's a long, slow process for most, not for everyone. Some people have, these big awakenings that happen overnight. Certainly wasn't that way for me. I'm still a work in progress, like I mentioned, but when you get the tools and the vocabulary and the practices that work for you, one of the simple ones that I do is just bring your hand to your chest and just say, I'm okay. Now, for some people, that's going to be like, that is so weird. I can't do that, but it's a self soothing, it works on your nervous system as well to just calm down and make you feel okay, maybe I am okay. So we start with, trying to open the mind and the heart to the idea that you might be perfect the way you are, right? My attitude is completely opposite what the sinner, the sinful based, if you do this, then you will have some terrible afterlife, um, or current life. Uh, I believe everyone is perfect. Everyone was put on this earth to be who they are. And then the conditioning, the pain, the abuse, whatever they went through has caused them to lose themselves. And that if I can work with someone to start to change that by being aware, by gratitude practices, forgiveness practices, self compassion, and compassion for others practices. And they all fit together with meditation, with breath work. It's all training basically to be able to see inside
Hmm.
and see the good in you. It it takes for some people, it takes so much work. You know, I did it after Glenn died. I went through this process because I was in so much pain. I had to figure out a way to suffer less. I
Hmm.
hated, I was in hate, I was in shame, sadness, guilt. I was in all these places you just don't want to be. And I was killing myself with you know poor health practices. And so I was motivated to feel better. And it took me, reading books, going to mindfulness meditation teacher training, working with my trauma therapist on days when the last thing I wanted to do was sit on her couch and talk about
Hmm.
pain. Um, but I kept going because I wanted to enjoy my life again. I had no idea how much more I would enjoy my life after, becoming a daily meditator, becoming a sober person, doing my soul work, helping others suffer less. I have such a
Hmm.
fulfilling life now.
No, I love that. I do. Where can people find you? Because I'm sure they're like going, where can we find Michelle?
Thank you. My website is inhabitjoy.com. I have a author page on Amazon, Michelle Ann Collins. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm easy to find.
Awesome. I love that. I know we've talked about a lot of different things. Was there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to share with our audience? Or a
You
closing
know,
thought, either way.
usually my closing thought is about self-compassion. Stop shooting on yourself. But we covered that really well. I appreciate that. I love getting that in early. Um, so I guess just to say, keep going. There is some way out there, some practice, something to do that will allow you to move to your next step of awareness, your next step of releasing pain. If you're in a grief cave or anything like that, there's a way out. Just keep going, keep looking for it.
I love it. Michelle, thank you for being on. And like she said, keep going. Love yourself and don't get caught up in what society says should be success or happiness for you. It's your life to live. Go live
Right?
it. Share this episode. And until next time, do something that makes your heart happy and calms your nervous
Yes.
system.